my channel. So today I want to talk about how you can understand the task which you've been allocated for your assessment, whether that be an essay title, a presentation, a learning outcome. And I want to do this because when I was a student, whenever I was given a title, I used to start just simply get going, start writing. And often I used to receive feedback along the lines, you're off point, or this is not applicable, or this is irrelevant. So if you are one of these people, you've had some similar feedback, or you're just quite not sure where to start when it comes to assessment, then this is the topic and this is the video for you. Best of luck. Let's get started. Okay, everyone. So let us start by considering the following essay question. And this is basically what most questions or learning outcomes may potentially look like, even though obviously different universities may have different approaches. But generally speaking, this is what more or less any question or learning outcome or title is going to look like in any of your assessments. So in this particular question, we have the following statement. Positive mental well-being is important throughout the childbearing period. Discuss the role of the midwife in supporting women's mental well-being and ensuring access to perinatal mental health services. Now, at least when I was a student, when I used to look at such a question or title like this, because it seems very long, I genuinely used to get a bit agitated. Where do I start? What do I need to do? How do I go around trying to understand this long and complex title? And sometimes, to be honest, they can be even longer than this, even though at times they can be maybe particularly a bit simpler. But what do we do? How do we address it? Where do we start? And what I always advise is to start by breaking it down. There's lots of sections to this question, to this title, and to any other learning outcome. And the first thing you need to do is to break it down. But obviously, you're going to ask me, break it down into what? And normally, whether it's a title, a learning outcome, or a question, normally you're always going to have the following sections into each of these questions. And that is the task, the topic, the focus, restrictions, and the context. And we're going to look at each one of these individually slightly closer. So let us start by the key parts. And the key parts are going to include the task, the topic, and the focus. Now, the task is basically what you need to do, broadly speaking. It is the specific direction that tells you what you need to write, how you need to write, or talk about a particular subject. Now, here I'm not talking about whether it is a presentation, an essay, a report, or dissertation, or a viva. That is not what I'm talking about here. And I'm also not referring to the word count or the time that you're spending in a presentation. Here, I am telling you how you need to write or talk. So basically, what we're looking for here is key words, sometimes called processing words. So, for example, you may have the word explore, or justify, or analyze, or describe. These are all the tasks or processing words. And every different processing word is going to have a specific different explanation and therefore a different specific direction of what you need to do. So, for example, a learning outcome might say, explore the role of healthcare professionals, or it might say, justify decision making strategies, or it might say, appraise evidence based literature on perinatal mental health. So, that is the task, what we need to do. The next section is the topic, the next key part. And this is the broad topic that you need to write or talk about. Now, normally there will be one or two topics highlighted in a particular learning outcome or essay. But sometimes when you have a complex piece of work, you may have multiple topics which you need to talk about. Sometimes in one essay, one report, you might have three or four different learning outcomes which you need to address. And the different learning outcomes may then have different topics into each of them. So you need to account for that when you're planning for work. So, what kind of examples might be we looking here for? So, the broad topic might be, for example, continuity of care, breastfeeding, childbirth experiences, perinatal mental health, or any other topic related to healthcare. Now, finally, when you start combining these topics with the task, you might end up with topics such as discuss continuity of care. So you have your task and the topic. You might have analyze breastfeeding. Once again, you have the task and the topic. Or you might have a question, for example, debate childbirth experiences, which is once again, you have the task and the topic. Now, most of the time, any question or learning outcome is going to have a focus from that topic. And this is that specific aspect of the broad topic which you need to focus on. This is sometimes also called a limiter. And even though it is a focus, there still may be many potential topics to write about. So basically, the focus might in itself be an umbrella term for many different other areas. And as we often say, um, you cannot write about everything, particularly when you're limited for time. So, for example, some examples of specific focuses of different topics you might have, for example, political influences of continuity of care. So, here, political influences is the focus, whereas continuity of care is the broad topic. You might have challenges of breastfeeding, where challenges is the focus and breastfeeding is the broad topic. Or you might have the impact of childbirth experiences, where here we're going to be looking at the specific focus of impact, and the broad topic is childbirth experiences. So these are the three key parts: your task, your topic, and your focus. But sometimes you will have other considerations in a learning outcome or a question or essay title. One of these other considerations is restrictions, and this is what limits the focus even further, even though they are not always present. So, example of restrictions might be the challenges of breastfeeding. We already said that challenges is the focus and breastfeeding is the broad topic. But this time you might have an addition which says among young adults. So here we're expected to only focus on the challenges of breastfeeding among the younger population and not on the wider population. So we're not looking at all women, but only maybe potentially at teenagers. Another example might be, as we've said before, we might have the impact of childbirth experiences, where the impact is the focus and childbirth experiences is the wider, broad topic. But this time the restriction might be on maternal infant attachment. So we don't want to look at all the different impacts of childbirth experiences, but we specifically want to look at the impact on maternal infant attachment, and that is our restriction. Finally, another consideration which you need to keep in mind is the context. Now, the context is not always provided, especially if it is a learning outcome, because in a learning outcome, normally you only have the task, the topic, the focus, and maybe a restriction. But when you have a title or a question, you might be given a context. And this is not directly related to the task, but it does give you an insight or an idea of what your tutor was thinking about when she set that task, and it's there to help guide your research. For example, you might have a title which says evidence suggests that young adults require tailored support to ensure continuation of breastfeeding. Discuss the challenges that young adults face when breastfeeding. So, in this example, we've already said that discuss is the task, breastfeeding is the broad topic, challenges is the focus, young adults is the restriction. But here we have been given a bit of a context where it was highlighted that young adults require tailored support to ensure continuation of breastfeeding. And what this context does is it gives you a bit of an insight that maybe potentially the tutor is expecting you to mention or discuss in some shape or form the required support that young adults need to help ensure continuation of breastfeeding. So, those are more or less the parts which you expect to see in a learning outcome or title or question when you're planning an assessment. So if we go back to the first example which we had around mental well-being, I'm going to go through the title again. So we have positive mental well-being is important throughout the childbearing period. Discuss the role of the midwife in supporting women's mental well-being and ensuring access to perinatal mental health services. Now, here I want you to take a pause and consider for a moment, can you identify the parts which we've mentioned in this title? I'll give you a moment to think about that. Right, so let us start by the task. I hope you identified that the task is discuss. The essay, the title is telling us to discuss something. The broad topic is the role of the midwife, and we have that one broad topic. However, in this situation, we have not one but two things to focus on, and that is the role of the midwife in terms of supporting women's mental well being and ensuring access to perinatal mental health services. So, there are two things which the tutor wants us to focus on in this situation. In this title, we do not have a further restriction presented, but we do have a context, which is positive mental well-being is important throughout the childbearing period. So the tutor is going to expect us to highlight the significance of positive mental well-being at some point in our work. I hope this makes sense for you, but if you're still not quite sure, feel free to pause, rewind the video a little bit, and we can review what we've just said before we move on. Right, so now that we understand how to break a question, what do we do with it? Here is where we need to pause and think. We need to make sure that we understand the task completely and fully. And if we don't, we need to ask questions. So, making sure that we reach out to our tutors to ask those questions where we do not know exactly what you mean by this term or by this word. Or if you do have an understanding of what you think it might mean, feel free to speak to your tutor. I think this is what you mean by it. Is this what you had in mind? Just to make sure that you are on the right track, especially if you're in doubt. Start your research and read a lot. And these two parts where you start your research and reading, I'm actually going to cover in a separate video later on. But first, let us go through some examples of tasks which you may come across, particularly in your first year of studies. Now, there are many different key terms or processing words which you might come across throughout your studies, and particularly in your first years, where as well as you get started with your academic writing. And I will put a link in the description box with some examples of different processing words, but I wanted to place two very common terms which you'll come across, two common tasks which you'll come across in your first year of studies, whatever healthcare professional course you're studying. So the first one is to explore. And basically, to explore a topic means to take a very objective approach. So your thoughts and feelings are not considered in the equation. You basically will be presenting findings from different research, from different literature, from different reports, so basically from different perspectives before you consider your own view. And that is what makes the insights all very objective. This makes it a very descriptive approach because you're describing findings from other resources around the particular topic and focus. Another example is to demonstrate. And this basically means that whatever argument or statement you are presenting, you need to make sure that you are supporting it with sufficient examples and evidence. It's basically imagining that you're presenting a case, and to make sure that that case is solid, you need to have all the evidence and all your ducks in a row to make sure that that is viable. And this evidence will come from literature, from your research, from experience, or from all of the above. In your second year, you might see that you're stepping it up a notch and you have slightly more complex tasks involved. For example, you'll need to analyze, and this is moving away from that descriptive approach. And it means to deconstruct a topic into smaller parts. So basically, it means that you're exploring that topic into more detail, looking at different aspects of the idea. You're going to be using evidence for or against a particular argument and how these are going to link together. Now, if you stop here, the work is going to end up very descriptive and you may end up not meeting the required task. So, it is very important that you add the evidence and add why the evidence which you provided matters, and basically why the information which you provided is of great significance. Now, analyze tends to be a topic which tends to lead to some agitation among students, among me as well when I was a student. However, it's actually not that complicated because the important thing is that you add why it is so important. But I still recognize that it can create some anxiety, and I will have a separate video just on analysis and how to help you achieve this with different examples as well. Another task which you may come across often from your second year onwards is to appraise. And this basically means to discuss and evaluate the quality of evidence that you're using in your work. And this will mean highlighting the strengths and limitations of literature or reports. And it does require a bit of a basic understanding of research. Once again, it can sometimes lead to some uncertainty among students because you need to understand the language of research, and that's why I will have quite a few videos just talking about appraisal. And finally, in your third year, you will once again step it up a notch and will find some new tasks which we come across. The first example is to critically analyze. And this is the same as the term analyze, but this time we're taking it that one step further because this time we need to provide our own opinion or verdict following the evidence we've presented. So basically, here your opinion matters and it must be supported with evidence that backs that claim. And finally, another example is to justify, where you need to provide convincing evidence and debate that supports that particular statement which you're putting forward. And this will need to be demonstrated with good reasons for adopting that particular stance. So, once again, making sure that you provide and discuss contrary viewpoints and provide adequate evidence to justify that. So basically, those are some of the tasks which you might come across in 3 years. As I said, there will be many, many more which you can come across. So if you're ever unsure of what the particular task means, make sure that you speak to your tutor. Now, in terms of topic, it is important that you learn how to extrapolate. What does this mean? So basically, the topic and the title could be anything, but the secret is learning how to extrapolate those words from that topic because this is what will guide your research and will help you find more information that you need to talk about. Many times these words are called keywords, and this is what you will write down in your search box when you're looking for evidence. And it is good practice that once you identify what the broad topic is, you write down these keywords. So, just to give you an example, let's imagine that the perinatal mental health is the broad topic. Now, when we think about perinatal mental health, I can think about many other topics which are going to be relevant to this broad topic, such as mental well being, anxiety, stress, confidence, depression. So, all of these are basically keywords. Imagine you were asked about the importance of perinatal mental health. But if you simply search for the term importance of perinatal mental health, this is unlikely to give you the answer that you're looking for. And that is why the other key terms of anxiety, depression, confidence, mental health are going to be very important. Because if instead you look for the term impact of anxiety, the research which you find is likely going to highlight the importance of perinatal mental health when dealing with anxiety. And that is why, in a nutshell, it is important to not just search for the one word which is present in your learning outcome or title, but think about other words, extrapolate other key terms from your essay title. And finally, your focus. As we said, these are sometimes called limiters and may or may not be present, but it is important to know that sometimes you can add your own limiters by focusing on a particular area of expertise. So, for example, you can focus on a time period, which is often done in healthcare. We often tend to use research maybe from the last 5 years or last 10 years, depending on what the tutors may advise. We will often also see that students will have an essay in which they focus on a particular population, like an age group or an ethnic group, as we saw earlier with our focus on teenagers. We might also focus on a place, a country, or a region, an area in the country. So, what would be important is that if you do have a focus, which is perfectly fine to do so, and it is often expected, it's important to make it clear from the very start and explain why that particular focus is important. So, finally, let's have one last example before we move on. We have here an example: discuss factors that influence the first 1001 days of life and outline how the midwife can promote well being. So let's do this together. Let's look at our task. This is interesting because we have two different tasks. We have the task to discuss and we have the task to outline. Two different things which this title is asking us to do. The topic, we have here the first 1001 days of life overall, and now the focus is going to be the influence of what's influencing these first 1001 days of life. And equally, we have the other topic around the midwife and how, and the focus, how the midwife can then promote well being. We have no restrictions here and no particular context provided, but as you can see, we almost have like two questions in one, each with a task, a topic, and a focus. So obviously, as you can see, these different parts can play a role in different ways across each title or learning outcome. So let's have a quick recap of what we've learned today. We've learned that it is important to establish what the title is or what the learning outcome is by unpicking it into the different parts or different elements of the title, it's important that we expand on that by making sure that we are understanding each term fully so that we can then know exactly what the task is, how to prepare the keywords, and to explore further. Because if we are unsure of what those terms mean, we need to ask, and once those are clear, that is when we start our research. So that is it for today. Focusing on how we understand the task that we've been given for any assessment, whether that is a presentation, a Viva, an OSCE, an essay, a report, or anything else. So I hope you found that extremely useful. Do feel free to jot down any comments in the comment texts below, and I hope I will be able to see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.